Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. Do the Knicks have enough help for Jalen Brunson to close out this series?
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. I want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, and remind you that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. It's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And if you want to become an everydayer, all you have to do when you're watching our smiling faces each and every day, they've been smiling often as the Knicks are rolling, hit that subscription button on YouTube and hit that notifications bell to ensure you never miss an episode. And then when you're on the go, hit the auto download function on your podcast platform of choice to ensure you never miss a pod there. But who will you not be missing? I'm Gavin Schell, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. He is Alex Wolf, editor-in-chief of The Strickland, the greatest Knicks website in the whole wide world. You can check them out on all forms of social media at thestrick.land. I mentioned it the other day, but I'll say it again. Saw a guy in a Sixers shirt, not a Sixers shirt, a Strickland shirt at the Sixers game, and it looked awesome. I highly recommend you get one for yourself. And today we are joined by our buddy XJ of Knicks Film School, does the Casual Fridays pod for them there, the hot hand theory. So without further ado, let's get into it all with the fabulous XJ right now on Locked On Knicks. All right, guys, as promised, we are lucky enough to be joined by our buddy XJ. He's been putting in work on the Locked On Knicks podcast, third or fourth appearance in the last few months. Could not be happier to have you back, buddy. He is the co-host of the Hot Hand Theory podcast. He is also a big-time contributor to Knicks Film School and the Casual Friday pod over there. XJ, welcome in, buddy. Good to talk to you. Has your heart slowed down yet from game 4? Has it slowed down from game 2? Like, how are you feeling?
I was going to say, Gavin, it's still going from game 2. It hasn't slowed down yet. Resting heart rate has elevated 10 beats per minute this playoff. So, hopefully we'll get it down. I'm super happy to be on with both of you guys, though, by the way. I haven't been on with both of you yet. So hyped to talk Knicks, talk about the situation we have at hand at game 5 to end the first round and move forward. So I'm super excited. Happy to be here.
It's like a ninja challenge. This is the final boss. You did Alex, you did me. Now you have to deal with both of us at once. Best of luck to you, and best of luck to the New York Knicks, who are one win away from wrapping up this series. But I feel like most of the Knicks fans I've talked to and most of the people I've seen on Twitter, it's kind of a foregone conclusion in their mind that the Knicks are going to win game 5 and that the Sixers are just kind of emotionally done with this series. I know Alex, I think correctly referencing the comments Embiid made after the game about the Sixers crowd. Like, that was a little bit of a sign that, like, all right, he knew, like, all right, maybe we just don't have this stuff. And this might just be like pessimism that's been beaten into me by 20 years of being a Knicks fan, but I'm not quite there yet. I think obviously game 2 was won on the thinnest of margins. Game 1 was won on Josh Hart just going crazy from 3 at the end. And game 4, just going back and watching it. And to be clear, my perspective was leaning this way, so maybe I saw more of this, but just the number of mistakes the Sixers made, I still think there's stuff there's meat on the bone for them to come back and win this game 5, maybe go home, take game 6 and really put some pressure on the Knicks. And where my concerns, I think, kind of congeal, that was probably the grossest adjective I could have picked there, is the late game offense for the Knicks, and just generally if they can find enough help for Jalen Brunson. So I'm going to throw a bunch of numbers your way, XJ, and you can tell me what you make of it. The Knicks made just 2 field goals in the last 8 minutes. Both of them were by Jalen Brunson. Their other offense in that time included just multiple bailout fouls by the Sixers, including one with 2 seconds left on the shot clock when Deuce McBride took that 3. He ended up making 2 free throws. Another one on Josh Hart on a fadeaway jumper that got him 2 free throws at the shot clock horn. He ended up making both those. So that was 5 points that separated the Knicks down the stretch. And more generally, it seems like the Knicks have just tried to take the air out of the basketball late, kind of holding on till the final 7-8 seconds of the shot clock and saying, all right, Jalen, make some magic. So far, he's had the energy to do that. He's had the energy to drive 28.5 times per game. Luka Doncic has only driven 23 times per game in these playoffs. He's the next closest guy. No one else in the NBA is within 10 of Jalen Brunson. That stat. Shout out to Jonathan Macri for that number. The Sixers as a team are only at 32 times per game. So all this adds up to massive volume, massive workload for Jalen Brunson. Can he carry the Knicks home one more time? Because it just doesn't feel like he's getting a lot of help down the stretch of these games. And is there a way he could find some more help in game 5?
Yeah, I want to say, like, I always come on for the concerns episodes. That's what you bring me on here for. But hey, actually, welcome. What are you deathly concerned about?
This is the ultimate compliment because you make me feel better about them.
Well, you know what? I think it's appropriate because that's all I think about. All I think about is the concerns and how we can mitigate them. So I'm glad to be talking about it. First, I want to say the thing with the drives per game, I do want to say, like, I think we need to qualify that a little bit. The drives from Brunson are invited by the Sixers defense a lot of the times with Embiid in the deep drop whenever they go 1-5 pick and roll. So to me, that's partially one of the reasons for the drive numbers being so astronomical. Also, there is, to me, a qualitative difference from, driving for short pull-up mid-range shots versus driving for getting all the way to the rim. You're not welcoming guys like SGA and Anthony Edwards to get ahead of steam going and like get all the way to the rim. Your goal is to deter their drives. Whereas with Brunson, the big's in a deep drop and they're kind of like, go ahead, Brunson, drive. You're not getting to the rim. You're going to shoot a short mid-range shot. So they're kind of welcoming it. And so for those reasons, I don't feel as concerned about the workload on Brunson. I think it's okay. I think it's okay for him to have these crazy drive numbers and all of the data that we're seeing about, his usage and everything else that he's creating. I think it's kind of okay because I feel like it's sort of sustainable given some of those differences. And I also think that, I don't know, I feel like Brunson is able to survive and all the Knicks players are kind of able to survive these insane minutes numbers because of what you just mentioned, Gavin. So the Knicks do tend to slow things down and just dribble out the ball. And Brunson's going to make his first move with 10 seconds left on the shot clock. And the Knicks are going to try to get offensive rebounds if he doesn't score. And the reason that they're able to play 42 minutes and Josh Hart is able to average 45 minutes per game is because the pace is so slow. You're kind of resting while you're waiting for Brunson to make his move. And he's sort of resting while he's just sitting out on the perimeter, dribbling the ball. So I think it's a little different. And obviously I am not one to look forward, but it may be a little different in a situation where they're playing a team like the Indiana Pacers, where the pace is through the roof and you're not really going to be able to sit there and pound the ball and wait to attack. In this case, I think it's okay. The Sixers play really slow. The Knicks play really slow. Combined, they play extremely slow. I think they're third, and both of them are third in pace in the postseason so far. So I'm okay with the offense being really reliant on Jalen Brunson pick and rolls. I do think they need to figure out another source of offense. And to me, the biggest thing that I would do is I would just always stagger Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson, because I think that Josh Hart in transition is the Knicks' best offense when Jalen Brunson is not on the court. And I think, obviously those two guys are playing heavy minutes loads and there won't be too much time when they're both off the court, but I would maximize any stagger between the two to make sure that my offense can get as many easy points as possible when Brunson is off the court. So we're not bogged down in a half court situation where we're just relying on getting a 50% offensive rebound percentage, that's their offensive rebound rate when Brunson's off the court, by the way. So they're not totally relying on offensive rebounds to be able to create any offense. So I don't have great answers. I do have some reassurances that I don't think it's the end of the world, kind of the situation that we're seeing so far.
And Alex, we should just note real quick, because I didn't say it before, Bojan Bogdanovic officially ruled out for game 5, and he would generally be the alternate option to Jalen Brunson to create some offense. How concerned are you on this? And then I guess we can move on to maybe the next adjustment the Knicks have to make heading into game 5 if they want to win it.
It's definitely a bit concerning to me, having Bojan out. I'm with you, XJ. I think that they do need to find some ways to just take a little bit off of Brunson's shoulders, and you mentioned like the non-Jalen minutes; those look to be about 4 per game at this point. And the non-Josh Hart minutes is like anywhere from 0 to a minute 30, roughly, depending on the game. So. I do think that one of them should be on the floor at all times. I don't think that we'll ever run into a situation where they won't be. That said, losing Bojan is huge because I think that it's a shame because he was really just starting to find his sort of role on this team as a guy that could come in for 15 to 20 minutes and play off of Brunson a little bit when needed and just like jack threes with zero conscience. And, the second the ball touches his hands, take a 3-pointer. Or, in the cases where Brunson was sitting for a couple minutes, be the guy that could take the ball in his hands and, be the one that like, hey, if it comes down to it, we need to create a shot right here. He has that. And pretty much nobody else on the Knicks does at this point. Every once in a blue moon, Deuce McBride will show a little bit of being able to kind of sauce up on the perimeter and, use a screen and get inside, sort of similar to how Jalen does, but just not nearly as pretty. And then Josh Hart can just kind of bowling ball his way in there from time to time using a screen and then sometimes just kind of rolls in without enough of a plan, which, has bit him in the butt a few times. And then Dante DiVincenzo, as we've seen, as the intensity is ramped up in the playoffs, if he's getting more hounded on the perimeter, he's having a real hard time creating anything if you try to tell him to make something out of nothing. So I'm with you. I think, mixing things up and going to transition a bit could help the Knicks out. Especially against the Sixers who don't love to run in transition. I think that it really behooves them to give Bogdanovich as much treatment as possible going into the next series if they advance, because they're going to certainly need all hands on deck and possibly to expand the rotation just a smidge to keep up with a team like the Pacers if it does end up being them. They're going to need to be fully rested. They're going to need to be ready to play more high intensity minutes. But for now, I think, trying to, go with Hart as sort of the secondary initiator, so to speak. Even sometimes using him, they were doing this in game 3 when they kind of first got Jalen going, having Hart bring the ball down the floor a little more often, even just having DiVincenzo bring it down and over the timeline so that Brunson doesn't have to deal with getting hounded all the way up the court. It's all those little things can help with the workload and, generally making his life a little easier. We'll be right back in to talk with XJ in just a second. And we're going to talk about the Joel Embiid matchup and if the Knicks can rely on the OG Anunoby coverage that won them game 4 in game 5. But first, we got to let you know about our good friends over at DoorDash. And this Mother's Day, get something thoughtful for mom on DoorDash. Surprise her from wherever you are with fresh bouquets, the latest tech, gift cards, self-care treats, and more to make her day that much better. And does your mom have a sweet tooth? Maybe she's a tech enthusiast, a beauty connoisseur, or is she outdoorsy? No matter what she's into, you can make her smile with a fruit or flower bouquet, makeup, tech gear, workout wear, and more. And not only that, you could pair flowers with a gift card so she can celebrate any way she wants. Is she a bookworm? Try a bookstore gift card. Does she love a good latte? Get a gift card to her favorite coffee shop. You really can't go wrong. So get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off your next order up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flower, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. You order using DoorDash today. Terms apply.
I think the one other thing I saw rewatching the game is, and this has been a theme all season, is just a need for guys to shoot when they do have an opening. Like Josh Hart, it ended in a Jalen bucket, but like passed up a wide open 5-footer at one point. He also passed up a fairly open 3 at one point, and guys just need to shoot. They need OG Anunoby to hit some threes. Like he was spectacular overall in game 4. 0 for 4 from distance though. For the series now, 4 for 14, and that's including 1 3-for-4 game in that game 3 loss. Like some of those just have to go down because those shots are there. And when Embiid is guarding him, he's willing to concede that shot. He's not wanting to press all the way up on Anunoby and risk getting blown by without any type of rim protection left at the basket. But I guess speaking of that matchup, that is the next area that I want to go. XJ, do you think that's more than just a wrinkle for the Knicks? We got into it a little bit last pod, and I just think from a physicality perspective and the fact that it's different guarding Embiid in the fourth quarter than the first quarter, where we've seen him be obviously much more lively, much more not completely out of breath. How often is Tom Thibodeau going to go to that, given how effective it was?
So I first I have to say I love OG on Embiid in general. So even though OG did get caught with fouls a few times, he's a much more disciplined defender than Hartenstein, and I think discipline is more key to guarding Embiid than is like physicality even. I think on Embiid, everyone's going to get caught with fouls. Like it's going to happen. But I also think OG understands the principle that you can't force a player to miss as a defensive player. Like I think sometimes guys get really keyed up to get a stop and they're like, I'm going to stop this guy from scoring. But it's like you can't. In the NBA, there are some guys who are just going to score on you no matter what. We see it time and time again with a guy like Kevin Durant. You're not going to stop Kevin Durant. You just have to try to make him uncomfortable. Don't let him easily get to his spots. You try to contest and you hope he misses. And that's the most you can do. And that's the most you can do a lot of times with Joel Embiid. You try to press up on him and try to make him miss. You have to get into his airspace, and then you might as well hand the ball to the refs and walk to the rebound blocks on the free throw line. Just say, okay, go ahead, Joel, take 25 free throws this game. So to me, that is key to guarding Embiid. And I really like OG's discipline. When he makes a mistake, you can kind of see him kind of diagnose, okay, I see what I did. It's not going to happen again. Hartenstein kind of makes those same mistakes, and it's just like on the same play, the next play, he does it again. So that's a big difference. The other thing to me is that although Embiid is so physical and so powerful and so strong, he's sort of low key a perimeter player. Like he doesn't really always bully guys to the rim on a consistent basis. Like he can when he wants to. And so to your point, Gavin, like the fourth quarter is kind of a different beast in some cases, but he doesn't really do that. So over the last 5 years, Embiid's been in the bottom 37th percentile in the league for big men in terms of frequency of his shots that come at the rim. So, of course, a big part of that reason is, when he gets deep in the paint, he's either getting fouled or double teamed a lot of the times. But if you're fouling him or you're double teaming him, what's the point of having a big body rim protector on him? And like it's kind of diluting the impact of having that kind of defensive alignment. So I also will say he normally gets a ton of shots in the mid-range, in the short mid-range, but he's not getting those this series. And I do think that's a result of his health. In this series, he's just been a perimeter-oriented player for the most part. Obviously only 4 games, but a career low percentage of his shots are coming from the short mid-range. He's not finishing shots at the rim. He's not finishing shots from the short mid-range. So I just think putting OG on him is smart. I think there's only, I feel like you could also put Precious on him as well. I think that kind of serves a similar kind of idea. And Embiid might score a bit down there, but he's not going to like destroy your defense with high percentage post shots, like possession after possession. So I would kind of take a little bit of a gamble there and just bet that Embiid is not going to just crush my smaller guy on the interior and kind of hope for the best. And I just don't imagine him doing that. Obviously none of us want to see it go to 7 games, but I don't imagine Embiid doing that for the next 3 games to win the series for the Sixers. Like it just doesn't seem like a sustainable model given his health right now.
Yeah, I think a big thing too with the OG defense to me is that it gives you options, right? Like I really hope that Hartenstein is on board with doing things the way that they did down the stretch of game 4, where he could just sort of be the floating guy, because I think he's equipped enough to do that. Like he's mobile enough, maybe not quite to the level of Precious Achiuwa, who's just straight up a smaller guy and by nature like a little faster. But I mean, he's mobile enough to get around. He bounces around in coverage all the time. He's good at getting back out to help on the perimeter if it's needed. But also he's a better rim protector straight up. So like if you're, as you alluded to, like Embiid isn't always going to try to get inside. But now essentially what you can do is have OG cover him on the outside and try for the ball denial, try for the, tipping the passes if Embiid's trying to pass it out, doing all the things that OG Anunoby does so well. And then, the Knicks can send that hard double again as well. So they can send, Brunson or, Hart or whoever they want to try to just run over there, make Embiid hear footsteps, try to slap the ball away, cleanly, of course, so that he doesn't get that foul call. And then go and, try to prevent anything if he's able to get past them. But then you've got Hartenstein there that can drop in and meet him at the rim and still give you that presence that you need if you need it, without it being option A. But I also think that Hartenstein is like quick enough and good enough at processing the game to understand like, okay, Embiid's definitely not going to go in. So let me, bounce out to whoever, Kyle Lowry or whatever, who's just sprung open thanks to Jalen Brunson coming over here to help to make sure that he doesn't get an open 3. Then the rotations will stay crisp and everything will be good. So yeah, I think it could work. I don't know if the Knicks will go to it right away. I feel like they'll probably go to the traditional alignment to start the game. but I wouldn't be surprised if they go to it quicker than we saw in game 4, where it didn't really come out almost by accident until the fourth quarter. But I could see where they welcome those switches again, like they sort of did to start to set the tone early in game 4, in the first quarter, in the second quarter, where OG would get switched onto Embiid. But I could see them doing that almost more intentionally, maybe even just to throw Embiid off, to think, oh, I'm about to get a possession with Hartenstein here, and then try to force that switch to get OG onto him just to fluster him and see if you can get into his head that way. But Gavin, I don't know if do you have any different thoughts on that, as far as like how, if that might work early on in the game?
Yeah.
Because I do think it is something they could go to, even if they just don't commit quite as hard to it as they did at the end of game 4.
I think there is a risk of tiring out Anunoby, and I think this is where kind of the first two questions come together. Like, it's pretty clear to me, like with Bojan out, he and Dante not playing particularly well. And look, Dante can turn it on and have a good game, and that might be as simple as that, and that's the series. But I think if OG is going to be your second option on offense, it's just a lot to ask him to guard Embiid for even half the game. And I think that's probably my bigger concern than it really blowing up defensively. The other thing I think, if the Knicks go to that alignment, they have to continue to do that, I'd be a little bit worried about earlier in the game. I think one of the keys to it working was that the Sixers were often just very late to get into their offense, and that allowed you to bring that hard double on Embiid, because you didn't have to sprint around rotating and recovering for 14 seconds. You had to do it for 6 seconds. And it wasn't a situation where, let's just say you successfully get that double on Embiid, you deter him from shooting. There wasn't time to say, all right, well, we're just going to go into a maxi pick and roll now. They couldn't do that because there just wasn't enough time in the shot clock. And that's how you got those possessions where Precious was flying out and blocking Embiid shot at the horn. And I think earlier in the game, they're going to be just physically and mentally sharper, and they're going to be more able to, all right, get the ball to Embiid, maybe tries to bully OG, like double gets there, or OG stops him. Like, they still have time to go to something else. To me, that's why it worked better later in the game. But I think what XJ said was totally valid. I mean, the way OG was able to front him and just get Embiid out of a rhythm, even catching the ball, like, that feels very intentional. That feels very sustainable to me. XJ, I don't know if you have any final thoughts on that, or if not, we can pivot to what other adjustments the Sixers have left. All right, guys, we are going to wrap things up with XJ talking about if the Knicks need to go small without Bojan Bogdanovic, or is it finally time for the Alec Burks experience? That next on Locked On Knicks. But first, we wanted to remind you that it's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150. I feel the need to repeat it because that's a lot of money, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What am I looking at? Well, I'll tell you that question I just asked myself. The Knicks are 4-point favorites in Game 5 over the Sixers. I'm assuming you're all riding with New York. I'm riding with New York. Take that -4. Win some cash by visiting FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. To me, the most obvious way for them to be in these games is just to rebound the basketball. You mentioned the extraordinary offensive rebound rate the Knicks have when Brunson is off the floor. Just in general, in the second half of this game, the Knicks got 10 offensive rebounds on 27 missed shots. That's a 37% offensive rebounding rate. There was an 11th missed shot where they were fouled. There might have been another one that I missed, but let's just call it 11 out of 27. That's a 40% retention rate. I don't know if that's the right term. The Knicks led the NBA this year in offensive rebounding rate at 29.6. That is crazy. And just going back and watching them, there were a few that were like a little fluky, where like Maxey would just fumble a ball, or Hart would get away with a foul, like tipping it out of Batum's hands. But for the most part, it just sort of feels like the Knicks have better rebounders than the Sixers. And I don't maybe they could go a double big lineup and play Paul Reed. I've heard on Sixers podcasts, they've talked about throwing KJ Martin out there, Ricky Council out there, guys with more athleticism. Like, do the Sixers have any kind of response to that? Because that, even more so than Brunson just being the best player on the floor, that sort of feels like the ultimate Knicks trump card late in these games, that they're just going to be able to get the ball over and over again. And if Philly can't do anything about that, forget about winning Game 5. I just don't know how they win 3 in a row against the Knicks.
I don't think they have a real answer for it. Like
Let's go.
and I thought a lot about this because I think this is obviously critical. And I've talked to both you guys, I think, at some point about this. It's just been historically something I've thought a lot about, the Knicks offensive rebounding as a weapon and sort of being the real genesis of their offense in a lot of ways. Like oftentimes they have a very low effective field goal percentage. They aren't a particularly efficient team in scoring in the half court. And the way that they score and get these really high offensive ratings and end up with a highly effective offense is by getting offensive rebounds. And it just always feels sort of unsustainable to me, but somehow they're able to sustain it. And in this series in particular, I just don't see how the Sixers can deal with it. Anything that the Sixers can do to offset it, going with a double big lineup, putting in somebody who is just really like probably a minus player that is going to be ending up playing against the Knicks' best players. And I think that's just like a worse situation than it would be to just try to fight them on the board. So I think any kind of recourse the Sixers might have opens them up to bigger problems and gives you, I mean, we saw Brunson go off. Imagine if you have two bigs out there, you can really exploit that with Jalen Brunson, and that's going to make it much harder to cover him. Taking a wing off the court and replacing it with a big, it's just not really viable to me. So I just think the Sixers are going to have to beat the Knicks in a way that doesn't really feel doable over the course of 3 games. Like I just don't see it. So to me, I think it's pretty sustainable. I don't know it's sustainable at a 42% level. I don't know that it's sustainable at the level where when Jalen Brunson's off the court, it's at a 50% level. Like those things feel just astronomical and not something that you can do on a regular basis. You mentioned, some aspects of it seem fluky at times, Gavin, and, a couple possessions here or there, but at the same time, I do think it's a real advantage that the Knicks have, and I don't think that the Sixers have the personnel to really come with a recourse for it. So I think it's something that will be a theme in Game 5, and if we see other games in the series, it's going to continue to show its head.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't certainly doesn't help the Sixers case. I saw this quote earlier, so once offensive rebounding came up, I made sure to pull it up just for the hilarity of it all. It doesn't help their case when you have Joel Embiid saying it almost seems like they just know he's going to shoot it, he being Jalen Brunson, so they're just getting ready to offensive rebound it. Wow, what a concept. It's almost like scouting any Knick game over the last 2 years would have told him that.
Wow. I love having a 2024 version of The Lights Are Too Bright. That's pretty much it to me.
Yeah, it's almost like they're trying to get offensive rebounds. Well, no kidding. Wow.
Yeah, that's
What
really
a
funny.
revelation to learn this about the New York
It's almost
Knicks.
like they know he's going to shoot. It's weird. I don't know how they figured that part out, but then they got that part of the equation, and then they also know that they could potentially get the ball back after he does. It's crazy.
It's crazy stuff. So, I mean, yeah, I would say
But Alex, you forgot to say the second part of the quote, which was, "So I'm going to break their legs so they can't."
yeah. So my main recourse for that is I'm just gonna try to kill them right on the
If they're
court.
dead, they can't rebound.
Yeah. Daily reminder that Joel Embiid is a dirty player and made Mitchell Robinson miss at least one playoff game thanks to injuring him intentionally. Anyway, yeah, I'm with both you guys. Like I don't think that the Sixers have much that they can do to affect the Knicks rebounding at this point, because if they did, they would have already. You know what I mean? Like they would have boxed out better. They would have, but that's just not the team that they are. Like they don't have elite rebounders on their team. The main guy that they don't have an answer for is Josh Hart. Nobody on their team knows how to put a body on Josh Hart, and that's why we're seeing him average for like the second straight year in a row in a first round series, average like 15 boards a game as a 6'4", small forward, I guess, would be what you'd consider his position at this particular moment. If you want to say that OG is the power forward on the floor in the starting unit, doesn't really matter. Like he's just flying in, getting offensive rebounds. They have no answer for that. Unless that changes, I don't want to speak in absolutes, but like there's like very little chance that they're going to find a way to win 3 straight games if they're allowing Josh Hart to do what he does. So I don't really see any way that they're going to be able to combat it. And that's the Knicks' greatest weapon against these guys, and potentially will be their greatest weapon against any other opponent in the playoffs. Like it's something that we've given Tibbs credit for before on the show. Like, he found something that the rest of the league wasn't really considering worth looking at anymore in offensive rebounds these last 2 years. And he has weaponized them in a way that like every team in the league is now trying their best to sort of replicate, and nobody has, because nobody has the right personnel for it, or just nobody is putting the right effort into coaching it and making sure that it's a core part of their game plan. But the Knicks are going to continue doing that um, as things go along here. Um, I think this is we touched on this a little bit earlier though, and I want to touch on it again. So Bojan Bogdanovic ruled out for the next game. Maybe we're projecting a little further here, but we asked this question of ourselves last night, XJ, of what happens if you don't have Bojan for game 5? What happens if you don't have him for beyond game 5? And we sort of came to, I don't know that you tap into the Alec Burks experience again in game 5 willingly, unless your hand is forced, and you probably just go with a 7-man rotation. Go with who you can trust. I certainly think that's what Tibbs is going to do. Just ride his horses and say, hey, like, as long as, I mean, I guess they'll be scoreboard watching then to see if they're going to have an early second round series with Indy, potentially also closing out against Milwaukee 4-1 on the same night, which could kind of throw a wrench in the rest plans. But, I think he's probably going to go that direction. But where would you go as far as that's concerned? Like, would you try to find Burks a few minutes to try to save, some of these guys' legs a little bit? Or do you just roll with a 7-man rotation and see how it goes? But do you think that's sustainable going forward in the playoffs, if that's a problem that they're going to have to deal with potentially in round 2?
Definitely not sustainable to go with a 7-man rotation, but it's such a hard problem, and I mean, we've just come such a long way from the Knicks feeling like the team with like the best depth by far in the entire league. But injuries have just whittled them down, and now they're down to this, where you're faced with a situation where you go with 7 guys playing 40 minutes each. You go with Alec Burks, who knows what his plus minus is gonna be in the 4 or 5 minutes that he plays. Or you go with somebody like Shake Milton, who is completely unproven as a Knick, and I would feel just as scared about that. So I really think that, I mean, I know they're going to go with a 7-man rotation if Mitch and can't play. But I just don't think there are any good answers. At the same time, I do want to like kind of touch on something that you also mentioned, Alex, about the chances of the Sixers winning 3 more games. I think a big aspect of it is the Sixers lost a game that they should have won. Like, I do think they should have won game 2, and not based on some foul stuff at the end, but I think they just outplayed the Knicks overall. And so you really can't give up a game, kind of hand over a game. That makes you have to win 5 games, essentially. That's kind of how I think of it. Like, now you have to win 5 of 7, and you're just not going to do that. The Knicks are a better team than the Sixers, I think, overall, given this Embiid. So I don't see that happening. But the thing I'm most worried about is this situation, with the minutes being how they are, not having Bojan, not even being able to have a breather with somebody like Alec Burks or Shake Milton because you don't trust them. These guys are going to play heavy minutes. If the game is close in the 4th quarter, Embiid is going to start going to his foul baiting tactics, and those are really effective when you're tired and you're trying really hard and you're trying to guard and you don't have your legs under you. It's hard to not foul. And I think that the Sixers will have an advantage in a 4th quarter situation against the Knicks, given the minute situation that we're going to be seeing from these guys. And so you lose game 5 at home, you're going to game 6 on the road, and now all the pressure's on you, or else you're coming back home for game 7. So that is a really concerning situation for me. And I think that the biggest threat to cause that situation is the fact that Bojan Bogdanovic is not there. Even though, I'm not saying Bojan's obviously, such a great player and has been so impactful for the Knicks, but just the fact that he's able to soak up 10, 12 minutes is huge, and we just won't have that.
Yeah, and I think the way Tibbs is going to go about this is you're going to see some smaller looks, and that could be the thing that maybe sabotages the Knicks' offensive rebounding just a little bit. But I wouldn't be surprised if we got like 3 guard minutes with Deuce and Dante, and you had a little bit of that at the end of the 2nd quarter, and at times it was sort of the best the Knicks offense looked the entire day, because there wasn't even though the Sixers have started respecting Josh Hart a little bit more and are treating him like a bit of a shooter, it's different when you have guys like Deuce and Dante out there, who are 2 of the, 25 best shooters in the league right now. It's crazy to say that about Deuce because there just isn't a long enough track record, but that's how he's performed since he's gotten regular minutes, and it makes it that much harder to guard Jalen. You give up some stuff defensively, maybe. I mean, Kelly Oubre, even in times when Anunoby was on him, like he's had his 2 best finishing games by far these last 2. Like he's going to look to continue to get going. Tobias Harris only scored 2 points after the 9-minute mark in the second quarter, but early on he had some success going at Dante DiVincenzo and using his size. So it does open up ways for the Sixers to attack you. But if the Knicks want to make life a little bit easier on Brunson, even if it's not inherently in terms of other guys getting points, you can put 3 guards out there and you could have Hart and Anunoby playing the 4 as they sort of are already. But it's just a little bit of a different look than what the Knicks are currently doing, where you have both those guys on the floor pretty much for the entire game. I mean, what was it last game? 2-3 minutes when both those guys were off at the same time. Like it hasn't been for long. And I wonder if we get more like 6, 7, 8 minutes of that XJ, and maybe that opens up some stuff for the Knicks. Maybe they give up some stuff, but I think given the injuries, that's probably the best trade-off versus either plugging Burks in or going double big, which we know Tibbs is generally not afraid to do. But if you thought the load on Brunson was too much, just wait until you see Precious Achiuwa and Isaiah Hartenstein out there at the same time.
That's not an option to me. Just Precious at the 4 is not viable. But I really like what you said, Gavin, and I do think, and this is going to be, I know we're going to close out. I know why I'm closing out on this very blasphemous opinion that I'm about to share, but I do think the Knicks' best offensive lineup doesn't include Josh Hart on the court. And I know it's crazy to say, but I agree. To me, it is Jalen Brunson, it's Deuce McBride, it's Dante DiVincenzo, it's OG Anunoby, and it's a big. And that gives Brunson the best spacing environment that he can work with. I think we see Brunson score with a lot more ease. And I think we see a lot more threes going up and going in. So I think that they could run with that lineup for 6 minutes, 7 minutes, something like that. I think that would do a lot. That would really go a long way to help.
Yeah.
You're really asking a lot of Tibbs to sit Josh Hart for that long.
I know. It's unreasonable.
Minutes.
I know.
Hey, please be reasonable next time you're going to give a big take on Locked on Knicks, okay? On that note, I guess we're just going to have to kick you off and just end the show because I think we're pretty much out of time. But XJ, thanks so much for joining us, dude. Do you want to real quick remind everybody where to find your work and everything again before we sign off today?
Yeah, thank you guys for having me every time I'm on. I love it. It's a blast. At Hot Hand Theory on all socials, on YouTube, everywhere. At Knicks Film School, anywhere as well. And you can find me there on Fridays, casual Fridays on Knicks Film School and Hot Hand Theory. We drop a pod every week talking about a lot of the same things we talked about here and just going into more on the data perspective as well. So yeah, thanks a lot for having me, guys. Love it.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much for coming on, XJ. We'll talk to you after Game 5, hopefully with the Knicks moving on to round 2 next time on Locked on Knicks.